I should have laughed it off, maybe nodded, maybe turned it into a joke. But instead, the only words that came out were, "Too late." I already did. I didn't mean to say it out loud. But here's the thing. I think I had already known, long before my lips betrayed me, that she was going to leave a mark on me I couldn't quite name. It started at the auto shop, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of burnt coffee, oil, and old rubber. I worked the afternoon shifts, mostly routine stuff, rotating tires, patching leaks, doing the jobs the older guys didn't want. It was just a paycheck. Until she walked in. She wasn't like the customers I was used to. She didn't hover nervously by the counter or pepper me with questions about pricing. She leaned against the doorway like she owned the place, not in an arrogant way, more like she was used to rooms adjusting around her. Mid-40s, I guessed. Black slacks, a white blouse rolled at the sleeves, and that kind of calm posture that made you stand a little straighter without realizing. Her car needed a new alternator. But that's not what I remember. What I remember is the way her eyes narrowed when I explained the repair. Not suspicious, not condescending, just measured. Like she was weighing me, not the car. "You're younger than my son," she said finally, her voice low, even. I opened my mouth, but nothing clever came out. I just shrugged, fumbling with the rag in my hands. Guess I started early. She almost smiled, almost. But her expression folded back into something unreadable. She tapped the counter lightly, as if concluding a meeting with herself. "Fine. Do it." The afternoon stretched. I kept stealing glances, and every time, I caught something new. The way she sat in the waiting chair, legs crossed, scrolling her phone, but not really scrolling. The way she adjusted her glasses, then slipped them off again, as though deciding if she needed to see things sharper or blurrier. There was one moment, small, stupid, but it caught me off guard. I had grease on my cheek, didn't know it. She noticed. Without thinking, she pulled a napkin from her purse, walked over, and reached out. Her hand hovered, waiting. I froze. "May I?" she asked. I nodded, though my throat tightened around the word I didn't say. She dabbed gently at my skin. The napkin smelled faintly of lavender. Her touch was quick, practical, nothing more than an older woman wiping off a kid's mess. But for me, it felt like a live wire pressed to my skin. When she pulled back, there was a pause. Not long, just a flicker of silence where the air seemed to thicken, and we both knew something had shifted. She cleared her throat. "Don't fall for me," she said finally, tone sharp, but her eyes didn't match her voice. And that's when I replied, almost without breathing, "Too late." I already did. Her face gave nothing away. No smile, no anger, just the slightest tilt of her head, as if filing my words away for later. She turned, sat back down, and didn't look at me again for the rest of the job. But here I am, days later, still stuck on that moment. On the lavender napkin, the space between us, and the silence that said more than either of us dared to. The second time I saw her, it wasn't at the shop. It was at the small bookstore across from the diner where I usually grabbed late coffee after work. I ducked in to kill time, half thinking I might finally buy one of those self-improvement paperbacks I never finished. And then, there she was. She stood in the aisle marked History, a thin hardcover balanced in her hand. Her glasses were on this time, sliding down the bridge of her nose as she squinted at the page. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, a few strands falling down near her jaw. For a moment, I almost turned around. It felt wrong, like I'd stumbled into a private version of her, one not meant for me to see. She noticed me before I could slip away. "You again," she said. Her voice carried that same careful weight, like she was testing the distance between us. I tried to sound casual. "Guess I'm stalking your book choices now." Her mouth quirked, but she shook her head. "Careful with jokes like that. People might start to believe you." We ended up walking the aisles together, not side by side. Exactly, more like in orbit. She'd pause at a shelf, I'd linger a step behind, pretending to read spines while watching the way she tapped her finger against each book before sliding it back. She had this deliberate way of moving, as though even the smallest choices deserved thought. At one point, she held a book out toward me. "This one, you'd probably hate it." "Why?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. Because it requires patience. I should have laughed, but I didn't. She wasn't wrong. Patience wasn't exactly in my nature. Still, I took the book, flipped through it, and caught a soft sound escape her. Not quite a laugh. More like a sigh caught on the edge of amusement. And I realized she was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixed, but the deeper kind. The one that came from carrying too much for too long. I noticed her hands then. How the veins stood out faintly. How her nails were trimmed short. Hands that looked like they belonged to someone who lived in control, but also someone who held on too tightly. She must have felt me looking, because she closed the book abruptly and set it back on the shelf. You shouldn't spend time here. With me. I frowned. Why not? Her answer was quiet, almost lost to the shuffling of other customers. Because people always expect something, and I don't have anything left to give. That silence again. That pause where the world seemed to hold its breath. I wanted to say something, that I didn't expect anything, that just being near her felt like enough, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached past her for a random book, our shoulders brushing, brief and electric. She froze, just for a heartbeat, then stepped back. We didn't touch again, but when I left the store that night, I carried the weight of that small, accidental contact like a secret no one else would ever understand. It was raining that night. Not a cinematic storm, just the steady kind of downpour that turns the streets into mirrors. The shop had closed hours ago, but I stayed late, tightening bolts on an engine I didn't really need to finish. Mostly, I just didn't feel like going home. I didn't expect her to show up. She slipped in through the side door, damp hair clinging to her temples, umbrella dripping at her side. They told me you'd still be here, she said. She had a folder tucked under her arm, paperwork about the car I'd repaired last week. But she didn't hand it to me right away. Instead, she leaned against the workbench, watching the rain streak down the windows. You live close? I asked, just to fill the quiet. Close enough to walk. She hesitated, then added, too far when it's raining. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. You could have called. I'd have brought the papers by. That made her laugh, not a full laugh, but a sudden, short sound that caught me off guard. And give you my address? You're persistent enough as it is. Her tone was teasing, but her eyes didn't joke. They lingered on me longer than they should have, then shifted away just as quick. I offered her a chair. She sat, crossing her legs, flipping open the folder. For a while, we just talked about routine things, service dates, warranty nonsense, small details neither of us really cared about. But then she closed the folder slowly, fingers resting on the edge. You remind me of someone, she said. I swallowed. Good thing or bad thing? Both, she admitted, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. Someone who used to look at me the way you do. Her words hung in the air like static. I wanted to ask who, but I didn't. Maybe I didn't want the answer. Instead, I leaned on the bench beside her chair, close enough to smell the faint trace of rain and perfume clinging to her skin. For a moment, neither of us moved. My hand rested on the bench. Hers brushed against it when she adjusted her position. The contact was small, almost nothing, but it sent heat rushing through me. She didn't pull back right away. She left her hand there, just close enough that our fingers nearly touched. I thought she might let them. Then her phone buzzed. She startled, snatched it up, and turned slightly away. I caught the name on the screen, Mark. She answered, her voice suddenly steadier, cooler. Yes, I'm fine. No, I won't be late. When she hung up, she didn't look at me. She just stood, smoothing her blouse as if erasing the moment that almost happened. I should go. I wanted to stop her. To say something reckless, like the words sitting on my tongue. Don't go. Stay? But I didn't. I just nodded, forcing my voice into something casual. Drive safe. She paused at the door, rain blowing in behind her, then glanced back for the briefest second. Her lips parted like she might say something, but she didn't. And then she was gone. I stayed there long after, staring at the empty chair where her hand had almost met mine. We found ourselves in the diner that night. Not planned, just one of those coincidences that didn't feel like one. I was already at the counter, half a plate of fries in front of me, when she walked in, rain still drying in her hair. Her eyes scanned the room, and for a second, I thought she'd pretend not to see me. But she didn't. She slid into the stool beside mine, ordered coffee, and set her purse down carefully, like she was buying herself time. Neither of us spoke at first. The clink of silverware, the hum of the ceiling fan, the sizzle from the kitchen, all of it filled the space we were avoiding. I watched her stir sugar into her cup, one slow circle after another. Her hands looked steady, but the spoon rattled faintly against porcelain. Finally, she said, "We should stop this." I looked at her. Stop what? Her eyes didn't lift from the coffee. Whatever it is we're pretending we're not doing. I almost laughed, except there was nothing funny in the way she said it. My throat tightened. I didn't think we were pretending. That made her glance up, and for the first time, she didn't guard it. That flicker in her eyes, that tired pull between resistance and want. It was there, naked, before she buried it again. "You're too young," she said, sharper now, like she needed the edge to keep herself from unraveling. "And I'm too." She stopped, the sentence unfinished, her jaw locking. "To what?" I pushed. Her silence was the answer. She took a slow breath, let it out, and stared at the rain-streaked window instead of me. I leaned in, elbows on the counter, my voice low. "Do you think I don't notice the way you look at me?" Her head turned, just slightly, and the air between us thickened. We didn't move, didn't touch. Just eyes holding each other too long. My chest ached with the weight of it, the truth neither of us wanted to carry. "What are we doing?" she whispered. Not angry, not even resigned, just bewildered. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say I don't know, but that wasn't true. I knew exactly what I was doing, waiting for her to give me permission to want what I already wanted. Instead, I just let the silence sit, our stares locked, as though words would break something fragile and irreversible. She finally shook her head, blinking hard, and whispered, almost to herself, "You make me remember what it feels like to be wanted, and that terrifies me." And with that, she slid off the stool, leaving her coffee untouched, and walked out into the rain. It happened on a Tuesday. She came by the shop just before closing, not dressed in her usual work clothes this time, but in a loose sweater, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger and older at once. She held an envelope in her hand, like she wasn't sure if she wanted me to see it. "I shouldn't be here," she said as she stepped inside. No hello, no smile. Just those words, tired and honest. I wiped my hands on a rag and nodded toward the envelope. "What's that?" Her grip tightened around it before she set it down on the counter between us. The corner was bent, as if she'd carried it around too long. "A letter," she said quietly. "From my son. He lives 3 states away. I hadn't heard from him in months. Today he wrote." I waited, unsure if she wanted me to ask more. She unfolded the paper, her fingers trembling slightly, and handed it to me before I could decide. The handwriting was uneven, rushed. Just a few lines, apologies for missed calls, promises to visit, a note about starting a new job. Nothing dramatic. But I saw the smudge where a drop of water had blurred the ink. I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. When I looked up, her arms were crossed tight, her eyes fixed on the floor. "He used to talk to me every day? Then less. Then not at all. I keep wondering if I pushed too hard. Or not enough." Her voice cracked on the last word, and it felt like the first time I'd heard it unguarded, without that iron control she wore like armor. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back to her. "You didn't lose him," I said, though my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted. "He's still writing. That counts for something." She finally looked at me then. Really looked, the kind of stare that felt like it stripped me down to bone. Her lips parted as if to say something, but instead, she shook her head and let out a broken laugh. "You remind me of him," she whispered. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they pushed me away, but because of the way she said them, soft, guilty, like it scared her to admit it. I stepped closer without thinking. Not touching, not even brushing against her, just close enough that the warmth between us felt like it might close the gap on its own. "Then maybe that's why you let me stay around," I said, my throat tight. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just stared at me for a long, unbearable moment, as if measuring the cost of whatever this was becoming. Finally, she whispered, almost too low to hear, and maybe that's why I shouldn't. It happened late, long after the shop lights went dark. I was locking up when I saw her car parked across the street. She wasn't inside it, though. She was leaning against the hood, arms folded, eyes fixed on nothing. I crossed over, slow, like one wrong step might send her vanishing. "You okay?" I asked. She let out a breath, something between a sigh and a laugh. "That's a complicated question." We didn't go anywhere. We just stood there in the quiet, the night around us heavy with crickets and the faint hum of a streetlight that flickered every few seconds. "I've been thinking," she said after a long pause, her voice steady but low. "About you. About this." I swallowed, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. And her gaze flicked toward me, sharp but softened by something she couldn't disguise anymore. "And I can't keep pretending it's nothing." The words hung there, heavy, reshaping the space between us. My chest tightened. I wanted to answer right away, to spill everything I'd been holding back, but instead I let the silence stretch, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted her to hear how much I felt in the quiet. Finally, I stepped closer. Not much, just enough that our shoulders could have brushed if either of us leaned an inch. "Then don't," I whispered. She shook her head, a wry, broken smile tugging at her mouth. "It's not that simple." "I know," I said, "but it's real." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a kid standing in her shadow. I felt seen, as if she'd finally let herself admit that what pulled us together wasn't an accident. We didn't kiss. We didn't even reach for each other at first. Instead, she let her head tip forward, resting lightly against my shoulder. It was the smallest thing, almost nothing, and yet it unraveled me. My hand rose without thinking, hovering before it finally settled against hers on the cool metal of the car hood. Her fingers shifted, slow and tentative, until they threaded through mine. That was it. No grand declarations, no promises, just the weight of her hand inside mine, warm and unshakably certain. The world around us stayed ordinary, streetlight buzzing, a car passing in the distance, but everything inside me felt quietly altered. We stayed like that, neither moving, neither rushing, just letting the silence do the talking. And when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Then let's not say anything. Let's just be." Looking back now, I can't really tell you the exact moment it shifted, when what started as glances and unfinished sentences turned into something neither of us could deny. It wasn't a kiss, or a line spoken at the right time. It was quieter than that. Smaller. It was her hand in mine on a Tuesday night under a flickering streetlight. It was the way she finally let her head rest against my shoulder, just enough to let me know I wasn't imagining the pull between us. I think what I learned is that love doesn't always arrive dressed in fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes it shows up messy, in awkward silences, in mismatched ages, in the spaces where both people are sure it can't work, yet somehow can't step away. She once told me, "Don't fall for me." I still hear that line sometimes, like a warning echoing in my head. But what she didn't know was that falling had already happened before she even said it. Before the napkin brushed my cheek, before the laugh she tried to swallow in the bookstore, before the way her voice broke when she read me her son's letter. Being with her didn't make me feel older or younger. It just made me feel honest. Honest in a way I hadn't been with anyone. She made me see that longing isn't something to be embarrassed by. It's proof that you're alive, reaching. And for her, I think, I became a reminder that she wasn't invisible. That time hadn't erased her from being wanted. We never put a name to it. We never sat across from each other and said the words people expect. Instead, we let the silence carry it, the glances, the accidental brushes of skin that didn't feel accidental anymore. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the lesson wasn't about what comes next, or whether it lasts forever. Maybe it was about seeing someone, really seeing them, and being seen back in return, for however long it's meant to last. So, if you've listened this far, I'll leave you with this. Sometimes the people we're told not to fall for are exactly the ones who teach us who we are when we do. What do you think? Would you have walked away, or stayed in that moment under the streetlight with her?